Teams MS700. I'm Monica from TechnoFocus, and I will be serving as your moderator today. Today's session will be presented by Johan Nickel. He's a Microsoft certified trainer and cloud solution architect with great experience and passion in Microsoft 365 and Teams platform. He's currently based in Switzerland. If you face any audio or video issues during the webcast, please post your queries in the Q&A panel, and our team is here to answer them all. Also, if you have any technical questions related to today's topic, please feel free to ask those as well. Now I would like to turn today's event over to Johan. Johan, you can take it from here.
Hi and a great welcome to Day 4 of the Administering and Managing Microsoft Teams Virtual Training Series. My name is Jochen Nickel. I'm a solution architect and a Microsoft trainer. Just allow me a short side note. Maybe some functionality or graphical user face is changed if you try it yourself, because obviously Microsoft is improving their cloud services every time. Today we will specifically focus on the management of the collaboration in Microsoft Teams. So we will go through the steps to create and manage teams, manage the memberships, manage specifically the access for external users, and the chat and collaboration experiences. Furthermore, we also implement policies for Teams apps so that we can really provide a great environment for our users and to build up successful projects. So as we already know, Microsoft Teams provides a variety of different policies for managing collaboration between users within teams and channels. And you can control the general abilities of users to use the chat, edit or delete their sent messages in conversations, and for example configure the collaboration features and settings that are available to them. So we have really a great bunch of functionality we need to discuss today, that we see all the capabilities we have in managing the Teams client and all the collaboration features itself. Creating teams and managing features of a team is a really important aspect of managing the whole Teams experience for your users. Extreme growth without an oversight and management leads really to a lack of information, clarity and confusion in specific. So we really need to have a closer look on how to create a new team, how we can use existing resources to create a team, how we can configure restrictions, and how we work through the different stuff like private and public channels, privacy levels of teams, and the archive restore, and the delete and restore of deleted items in Teams or the Teams itself. As we already know, by default all users can create teams using the Teams client and invite members, unless you restrict the creation, as we have seen with the Microsoft 365 groups limitation and so on. Also, you can restrict it just to the global administrators or the Team service administrators as well. You as an administrator can also create teams in the different, or better saying, over different methods, like we have seen about the Teams admin center, the Teams client, PowerShell or the Grave API. On the slide deck we see the typical process of creating a team from the client perspective. So obviously we have the two decisions we can do to join or create a team. Now we want to focus on the creation of a team. So the first step you need to decide is, when you create a team, you want to build it from scratch or you want to create it from an existing Microsoft 365 group or another team. That's the main thing what you need to do at the beginning. Afterwards, obviously there comes a very important decision as well, is which kind of team you will use. Like a private team where you need an invitation, public team where everyone in your organization can join, or an org-wide team where everyone in your organization is a member in. So that's basically the stuff what you gonna do with that. Obviously you can also create a new team with PowerShell with the new team CMD LED in a PowerShell session. where the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module is installed. So if you, for example, want to create a new team that's called sales, and that is a private team and it has a specific owner like John Benson, for example, you need to run the following command line. So new team minus display name sales, that's the first stuff. Then minus visibility, we said that we want to have a private one, and the owner would be, for example, Jeff.Benson at contoso.com. And you also can provide a description. This is a team, for example, for sales department. Using the PowerShell to create a team allows you really to configure permissions for adding and deleting channels, messages and users, modifying channels, blocking the access to Giphy and posting memes, instead of having to go back and changing the settings later. So that's really a great topic. But a short side note on that, if you don't specify an owner, the account running the PowerShell CMDLED, the user, and specifically who creates the team, will be added as both as a team member and the team owner. If you go through the part of creation from a template, so templates basically are pre-built definitions of a team structure that is designed around a business need or a project. So with this option you can use Teams templates to quickly create rich collaboration spaces with channels for different topics and pre-install apps to pull in a mission-critical content and services. So Teams templates really provide you a great predefined team structure that can help you easily create consistent teams across your organization. Obviously you got also the capability to use a different team as a template. So for example, if you want to leverage the same data, channels and settings from an existing team to create a new team, you can just make a copy and then choose how your new team is organized and set up. Another great way to create teams is using a base template. A base template is a special template that Microsoft created for specific industries. So these base templates often contain proprietary apps that aren't available in the store and team properties that are not yet supported individually in Teams templates. So once a base template type is defined, you are able to extend or to override the special templates with additional properties that you like to specify, for example. But some base templates contain properties that can't be overridden. By default, the base template is set to standard, which doesn't contain any additional proprietary apps or special properties. Just to give you a short overview, what we have the education class team, for example, which includes the apps of a OneNote class notebook, then specific assignment apps, and the team's visibility is set to hidden membership. And this, for example, is one attribute that cannot be overridden. On the other hand, we have the retail store. I already had a discussion about that in a previous session, where we have different channels already applied, like shift handoff, learning team properties, and the team visibility is set specifically to public. So we have a lot of great capabilities also to work with this base templates to create a team itself. Furthermore, obviously, we have also the chance to create a team from an existing resource. So you can, for example, upgrade a SharePoint team site or a Microsoft 365 group to a team directly. On the other hand, we have also the capability to also convert a distribution list, or better said distribution group, to a Microsoft 365 group, and then we can convert it to a team with an intermediate step. This also works if the group was created as part of a plan, in Planner for example. But just remember, when creating a team, the underlying group cannot have more than 5,000 members. So this is a quick important note you really need to notice on that. After we created a team, we can add the members to our team. So we can, for example, invite people to join to the specific Microsoft team, or we can add individual users, group, and even entire contact groups. So in this part, obviously, we need to go a little bit later on, specifically on the policy side, which allows us to really control specifically also this part. Also what it matters is about the privacy state of the team itself. Is it a private or is it a public one? So it defines, for example, that we can invite guests or who can really be invited to the Microsoft team itself. So really that gives us a good capability. Obviously you can also add the members to your team by the Grave API or the Microsoft PowerShell CND-lets that are provided for you. So this gives you also different capabilities to work on a Power Automate project or whatever else to bring an automatism inside of a team's creation process. The next important aspect, if we create our team, the next step will be to create a channel in a team. Channels are specifically dedicated sections within a team to keep conversations organized by a specific topic, project, or disciplines, for example. Each channel could be a different unit in a department or a project group in a larger project with specific different groups. Before we create channels, we need to first decide which channels we specifically need and if they shall be standard or private. And especially private channels require really a solid planning and decisions, because if they are the right tool to achieve our business aims, what we have. For example, just to give a short intro about this, a private channel is useful when you have a group of people in a team that want to focus to collaborate without having to create a separate team. So you isolate the specific group to the rest of the team. Or a subset of people in a team want to have a private channel to discuss sensitive information such as budgets, resourcing, mergers, strategic positioning, and so on. Let's discuss a bit more about these private channels. Basically what we have is, as here in an example, we have the channel A that is a standard channel. So this is an open collaboration within the team. So and it inherits the full membership list from the team. If we decide to use a private channel, we have really a focus, as it says here, on a private collaboration within the team. So this is a specific managed subset, and this is important, of members from the team. So it needs to be a member of the team, and then it could be a part inside of the specific channel. In case of the access control of a channel content, we have a separate SharePoint online site collection for the specific files with the access restricted to the channel members itself. So copy of channel message in private channels, user mailboxes for compliance, for example. In the creation part, we can also say, for example, if we have a classification label that says, okay, it's for example confidential, and then we can also say that a confidential channel needs to be a private channel. There are different options what we can really use. In case of the membership, we need to really see that we only use existing members and guests in the team that can be added to a private channel. So you can add an additional user that is not already member of the existing team. And obviously only the members of the private channel can view the private channel content itself. That's, I think, from the nature, that's clear. So, but we need also to see a little bit about the private channel permissions, for example. So in Case of delete private channel, obviously this is the team owner, and obviously the private channel owner can also use to delete the private channel itself. Also leave the private channel, so the private channel owner and the private channel member, for example, can do that as well. And add members, obviously the private channel owner is allowed to do that, not the team owner. Because private channels are very different from standard public channels, you as an administrator really need to make some additional considerations before you deploy them. Each private channel has an independent setting to edit members, membership permissions, mentioning and fun stuff for the entire channel. So not all features of standard channels are already available for private channels, and OneNote does not fully work in private channels. This causes several things to consider when adding notebooks to private teams, because the permissions for notebooks are not bound to the private channel. When a OneNote notebook is created in a private channel, additional users can still access to the notebook, because the behavior is the same as sharing access to any other item in the SharePoint site associated to the private channel. And if a user is granted to access the notebook in a private channel through a SharePoint site, removing the user from the team or the private channel won't really remove the user's access to the notebook. And one last point about that: when adding an existing notebook to a private channel, not everyone in the private channel will have access to the notebook by default, because they need separate access to the location where the notebook is specifically hosted, such as another team's SharePoint site, for example. On the following slide we see an example of a private channel in Microsoft Teams. You will see this log icon that indicates specifically a private channel. And as I already mentioned, only the members of private channels can see and participate in the private channels that they are added to. Obviously, additional features, like I mentioned, the OneNote part, also the planner or some other features, are still not available inside of a private channel. So you really need to keep care about this specific topic and really decide carefully that you use a private channel or not. So let's also summarize the managing private channels activities or actions we can do. Like I already mentioned, for example, to add members, for example, to a private channel. It's just allowed, as it already says here in this slide deck, that it's not allowed to the team owner itself. It needs to be done by the private channel owner in this case. So you can really separate with private channels also the control who is a member specifically of the subset of the team and who is the member in that. So also the manage tabs and apps, for example, is also associated with the private channel owner or with a private channel member in that case. And to delete the private channel, obviously the team owner itself and the private channel owner itself is able to do that. So if we take a closer look, and also for collaboration topics, the private channel guest, what he can do there. So to create a private channel that's not available, to delete it is not allowed. The only thing that's really specifically allowed to a guest is to leave the private channel. But he can't do anything else, like editing private channel, restore, delete private channel, add members, editing settings, or manage tabs and apps. That's not allowed to a private channel guest. The difference between the guest and the member, as we see here, is that we have just one more right that we can assign to a private channel member. That's about the manage tabs and apps. So we have similarity between the both roles, but there's just this one difference between them. So just to be more clear about that, each private channel has really its own setting. So it's including the ability to add and remove members and tabs and the add mentioning for the entire channel. So also what we can do is how a private channel or a private team can be discovered in your organization. That's also a capability or a management capability what we can do. We can see that under the settings in the Teams client on more options manage team, and on the settings tab you see the team discovery settings. You can also do that or change that by the set-team CMD to disable, for example, the discoverability of individual teams. So first of all, just make a get team with the display name and then set the team show in Teams search and suggestion and set this value to false, for example. As an admin, you can also control which users in your organization can discover private teams in a search result. So this you can do with a policy by using the new -CS Teams channels policy CMD-led, and you can assign the policy to the users, like new -CS Teams channels policy -identity. Let's say it is a vendor policy, and we say allow private team discovery to false, and then we grant the specific channels policy over grant -CS Teams channels policy -identity, for example the vendor user1 of company.com -policy name, and then we adopt the vendor policy. So that's a great capability to control who sees and who can discover the specific private channels, better saying the private teams in that case.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about onboard early adapters. So basically it's the best way to send really a welcome email to users with the names and descriptions of the teams that you created and invite them really to the conversations as is written here. So on the other hand, obviously the Teams client, which provides the best overall experience, you could use on a Macintosh computer, on a Windows device obviously, and on the mobile iOS and Android device. The desktop client is quite easy to install because on Windows you don't need to have admin permissions in that case. You can just start the installation and start working with the Teams application itself. The Teams for Mac, as already mentioned as well, here we have the requirements to put in admin permissions, and you will find the binaries under teamsmicrosoft.com/downloads, and you can also directly start working on your Macintosh computer with the Teams client itself. Another option to start your Teams experience, you can use the web client, which is really a feature-rich web client, and it supports really a variety of browsers. Like we see here, the Internet Explorer obviously 11 is not supported, but the Microsoft Edge, the Microsoft Edge Chromium based, and the Google Chrome are fully supported browsers. The Safari 13 Plus, there is a limitation. The one-to-one calls are not supported, but groups calls are supported with the full audio support. No video is supported, and sharing of incoming sharing only. There is no outgoing options. The latest version plus the two previous versions are not supported from the Firefox perspective, and Safari versions before 13 are also not supported. On the other hand, we have the mobile clients, as I already mentioned, for the iOS operating system and the Android operating system. So you need to begin from iOS 10.0 or later. You can just start it from the Apple App Store, and for the Android version you need to have a 4.4 or later installed on the operating system perspective, and you can just download the Teams mobile app from the Google Play Store.
As we see here, we have a lot of capabilities to monitoring our Teams usage. That's a very important topic if you start creating teams in your organization and you have a specific process for it, for example, you want to control. So basically we have the Teams usage report, and this gives you an overview of the usage activity in Teams. It's including all the total active users and channels, and the number of active users and channel guests and messages in a team, for example. The Teams user activity report gives you specific insights into the types of activities users, for example, engage in, such as how many people communicate through one-to-one calls, channel messages, and private chat messages, for example. The Teams device usage report shows you how users connect to Teams, including how many people use Teams on their mobile devices when they are on the go, for example. That gives you really, with these three reports, you get really a lot of great insights how your Teams infrastructure is growing, how the teams are in use, and which device platforms specifically are used in this modern communication way, collaboration way. That's a real great capability you can use and you should use in your project. Also use this basically already on the pilot phases, and then further obviously on the productive environment, that you have a great control over the whole infrastructure and your Microsoft Teams rollout. With the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, you get a great capability to manage your Teams environment. So you can directly start with Teams workloads, or you can approve delegated permissions for specific tasks, such as troubleshooting the call quality by assigning the right role to the user. You can also customize and configure default settings based on the organization profile or on the business requirements. So you have really always a great insight which Teams exists, how many channels there are available, how many team members, owners, guests are on it, and on the privacy level. So this gives you a great capability to control also the collaboration scenario. That's good way to go forward and to see and to have overseen information about all the Teams activities that are also done inside of your infrastructure. Specifically, organization-wide, Teams provide an automatic way for everyone in a small to medium-sized organization to be part of a single team for a collaboration. With org-wide Teams, you as a global administrator can easily create a public team that pulls in every user in the organization and keeps the membership up to date with Active Directory as users join and leave the organization. So only global administrators can create org-wide teams, and currently an org-wide team is limited to organizations with no more than 10,000 users. There's also a limit of 5 org-wide teams per tenant. When you create an org-wide team, all global administrators are added as team owners, and all active users are added as team members, including unlicensed users. So the first time an unlicensed user signs into Teams, the user is assigned a Microsoft Teams Commercial Cloud trial license. Another important thing is that there are specific account types won't be added to your org-wide team. Accounts that are blocked from sign-in, guest users, service accounts, room or equipment accounts, and accounts backed by a shared mailbox. As your organization's directory is updated to include new active users, or if users no longer work at your company and their Teams license is disabled, changes are automatically synced and the users are added or removed from the team. Team members can't leave an org-wide team. But as a team owner, you can manually add or remove users if needed. Just to give you a few best practices, so to really get the most benefits out of your org-wide team, just allow only team owners to post to the general channel to reduce the specific channel noise. Then turn off the add team and add team name mentions to prevent really overloading the whole organization. Automatically mark important channels as favorites to really ensure that everyone in your organization engages in the specific related conversations. Also set up channel moderation so that moderators can control who can start a new post in a channel, add and remove moderators, control whether team members can reply to existing channel messages, and control whether bots and connectors can submit channel messages. Also, the last thing I remember is just to remove accounts that might not belong. So make sure that you use Teams to remove users from your org-wide team. So if you remove a user some other way, such as the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or from a group in Outlook, the user might be inadvertently added back to the org-wide team in specific. In the next section of this module, we will jump over to managed team membership itself. Now let's talk a little bit about the designated teams roles. So basically Teams has two types of roles, users and administrators. Basically we have the team owner and the team member. Obviously a team owner is allowed to create a team, leave the team, edit the team, and so on. The request to add members is not available already. So basically the team owner has all the rights in that game. The team member have some restrictions on it. So with a team member obviously cannot create a team because he's inside a team. He can leave the team and he cannot edit or delete specifically the name or completely to delete the team itself. But it's allowed to add channels, channel name descriptions, delete the channels inside of the team, but it's not allowed to add additional members. So also to request to add members is allowed, add apps, add connectors, and add bots. That's all capabilities that you can really have on the team member side. To assign a user role, it's a very easy task inside of your Teams client. Because you can just jump over to more options, manage teams on the members plane, and then you can see what's happening on that. You also can say, okay, this is an additional Teams owner. You can say, okay, what the members can do. For example, you can add members and choose owners and moderators if you also have sufficient permissions, obviously, for that. So that's a really great thing that you have a self-service on board, that you can manage that on the client side itself. The next important point we need to take a look of it is the Teams admin roles, because Microsoft 365 provides a variety of pre-configured administrative role groups that selected users can receive elevated access to administrative tasks within the Office 365 world. The role groups are assigned through different portals like the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, the Security and Compliance Center, the Azure portal, and PowerShell as well. So the several administrative roles have full access to all of the Teams service settings, such as the Global Administrator and the Teams Service Admin. Other roles only provide access to certain parts of Microsoft Teams to perform, for example, recurring tasks such as troubleshooting call quality problems and managing telephony settings. The specific roles, as we can see here, is the Teams Admin. It's also the Teams Service Administrator, the Teams Communication Admin, the Teams Communication Support Engineer, and the Support Specialist. So just a short side note on that, even if Teams consists of different workloads from Office 365, obviously the team-specific administrator roles do not grant permissions to other services like, for example, Exchange Online or SharePoint Online. So to give you just a few things about what the Teams admin can do, obviously is the full admin, so he can manage Teams, the meetings, voice, messaging capabilities, view the user profiles, and access obviously the whole monitoring, troubleshooting information about call quality, like the call quality dashboard, for example. The Teams Communication Administrator is allowed to manage meetings, including, for example, meeting policies, configurations, and conference bridges. Also to manage the voice, the user profile, and they have access as well to the call quality dashboard, for example. The team's communication support engineer is allowed to view user profile pages and to troubleshoot the user call quality problems using the advanced troubleshooting toolset. And he's also allowed to access, monitor and troubleshoot tenants' call quality and their ability using data exposed in call quality dashboard. So down to the users who are really impacted by a poor call quality. On the other hand, we have the team's communication support specialist. It's also called in basic and advanced. The advanced is the engineer part and the basic tool set is for the specialist. And the specialist can access the user profile page for troubleshooting calls in call analytics. And he can only view user information for the specific user being searched for. He has also access to monitor and troubleshoot tenants' call quality and reliability using the call quality dashboard itself. And the team service administrator role in the Azure portal is the same role as the team's admin in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So if you assign this role to a member in the Azure AD portal, you can also see it in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, obviously vice versa. Next we go through the moderators. Obviously both team owners and members can have these moderator capabilities for a channel. So basically if the moderation is turned on for a meeting, for a team, sorry. Moderators can start new posts in a channel and control whether team members can reply to existing channel messages, for example. So as you see, the moderator capabilities are assigned at the channel level. The team owners have moderator capabilities by default, and moderators within a channel can add and remove other moderators within that channel. So also if we take a closer look to reply to existing channel messages, with the moderation, the overall ability of channel members to reply to a post can be also restricted. Also what you can do with, as a moderator, channel messages submitted by bots can also be restricted, and also channel messages by connectors, just like bots, connectors can also be restricted from sending channel messages. A special case for channel moderation is the default general channel, which exists in every team. So this channel supports only 3 settings for moderation. So anyone can post messages, there is no restriction, the moderation turned off. Anyone can post, show alert that posting will notify everyone, so no restrictions are available but includes a user notification to avoid spamming. And only owners can post messages. That's a strict moderation where only team owners can post messages. A short side note for the practical side, it is not possible to set up moderation for private channels. Where we can use, or in which scenarios we will work with moderation. For example, you have a channel that is an announcement channel. Let's say a marketing team uses a specific channel to share key project announcements and deliverables, and sometimes team members post content to the channel that more appropriately belongs in other channels. So the team owner wants to restrict information sharing in this channel to only the announcements, so that the team members can use the channel to stay on top of what's important actually. In this specific scenario, the team owner adds the marketing leads as the moderators, so they can post announcements in the channel and turns off the ability for team members to reply to messages in that channel. Another case is maybe we see about the channel for a class discussion in an education environment. So in Teams for Education, a science teacher, for example, wants to use a channel to engage students in focused discussions. And he needs to discuss specific classroom topics. In this scenario, the teacher allows his or her teaching assistants to moderate the channel, for example. The teaching assistants can create new posts to initiate and drive the discussion with the students. That's a quite often seen scenario what we can have here as in the moderator scenarios. So we repeated sometimes that really we talk about the permissions to create teams, but it's a really important topic for your environment and for your project. So just keep that in mind. So by default, all the users with a mailbox in Exchange Online have really the permissions to create Microsoft 365 groups, and therefore obviously a team within Microsoft Teams. So always really double check the scenario. Will all the Teams users really need to be able to create teams? Is it recommended? Yes, because you don't want to disturb the scenario that the people can work with this self-service, this the one side. But then you need to have really a specific, let's say, codec or anything like that inside of your organization, how and when a Microsoft team is built and created inside of the environment. And you need to have specific naming policies in place that the users really control, that we don't have double teams or a mass of teams that discuss the same topics, for example. On the other hand, what we already discussed is that we have a process in game where we just double check the creation of a team and to say, okay, I just request a team, I give a specific reason for the team, and another, for example, a manager or an administrator can double check, do we have already teams in the organization or not, and to decide, okay, that's approved. And on the other hand, the typical scenarios, the right template, the right configuration, the right naming, and all of that stuff, it's clear around this process. If you really need to modify these permissions, we can do that over the creation process. I already showed that for Office 365, but I said Microsoft 365 groups, and then we can do that and approve the rights to the correct persons. It's also a good way to go forward with a dynamic group membership, that maybe all the team leads or any one of that is automatically integrated as a team creator. There you can have really a lot of different ideas how you can plan or how you do the stuff to create your teams in your organization. Obviously there are still reasons for you to add members to a team, but you need to add an owner to an orphan team, or you decided to create department-specific teams and restrict users to creating non-business critical teams only via a company policy, as I already mentioned. So usually you would create department teams as a team with dynamic membership. This is an example from that what I mentioned slide before. So how to do this? We can work with that. It's a quite easy process. So if you can't create a team with dynamic membership, you need to know to add members using the Teams Admin Center. For example, the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module, the Teams client, or the Grave API. Basically, you can do that to manage the members with the add team user and remove team user topic in the PowerShell. And on the other hand, you can create these dynamic memberships. So Microsoft supports the dynamic memberships of team members by leveraging the Azure Active Directory dynamic membership feature. Dynamic membership enables you to define members or a team or one or more rules that check to certain user attributes in Azure Active Directory. So users are automatically removed or added to the designated teams as a user attribute changes or user join and leave the tenant. With the dynamic membership, you can set up teams for certain cores of your organization, like a hospital, create distinct teams for nurses, doctors, surgeons, whatever, a university for the college, classes, whatever, and an airline, for example, each flights they are conducted there in that specific topic. A side note, you need to have an Azure AD Premium license, a P1 license, and keep in mind that it may take anywhere from a few minutes to up to hours to reflect dynamic membership, because it needs to be calculated on the attribute that there are existing in Azure Active Directory. So you need to have a really just to wait for that. It depends really on your group membership rules. For dynamic group membership in Teams, you also must consider a few steps. So, for example, the rules can define who is a team member of a team, but not who is a team owner. That's an important topic. Owners will not be able to add or remove users as members of the team because we have predefined dynamic group rules. So you're not allowed further really to add or remove users. This is done by the rule from the Azure Active Directory dynamic group membership. So members will not be able to leave teams because we also have the effect or the relation back to the dynamic group memberships inside of the Azure Active Directory. To enable dynamic membership in a team, you must modify the underlying Microsoft 365 group membership by the Azure AD portal or by PowerShell. The references to the group will not change if you modify the membership. So if the group is used for access every member added by a dynamic membership rule, they will have access to the resources of the group. There is currently not a way to create a team with a dynamic membership directly. This is really right to know. You must either create a team and then change the membership rule of the associated Microsoft 365 group, or create a Microsoft 365 group with a dynamic user membership and then create a team from the existing Microsoft 365 group. Just a short note as well, you can also create a dynamic membership rule that applies to devices. In the context of administrating teams, you will mainly work with the user membership for the team, obviously. Just a short warning. When changing an existing static group to a dynamic group, all existing members are removed from the group. And the membership rule is processed to add the new members. So if the group is used to control access to apps or resources, really be aware that the original members might lose the access until the membership rule is fully processed. So you should test the new membership rule beforehand to make sure that the membership in the group is expected. You can do that in the Azure Active Directory portal. You have also a test mechanism really to prove that the new rule, what you set inside of the dynamic membership rule, is applied to the correct users. You can also do that specifically over PowerShell with the unified group CMD-lets, and you can change the to a membership rule if you define one. That's a great capability to work for. A short example could be a dynamic membership rule like user.department equals sales and a user department equals marketing. So you have different capabilities that are also available for dynamic group memberships, like not equals, equals, not start with, not contains, contains, and such a thing. So you can reference really the Azure Active Directory documentation to see all the capabilities that are available. Microsoft Teams basically provides a variety of different policies for managing collaboration between users within teams and channels. So you are able to control the general abilities of users to use the chat, edit or delete their sent messaging conversations, and you can configure the collaboration features and settings that are available to them. So in this specific section we will talk exactly about this management of chat and collaboration features. Messaging policies are used to control chat and channel messaging features for users basically. They can provide and deny messaging actions for users, such as the possibility to delete the sent messages, access to memes, sticker gifs, or the ability of users to remove other users from a group chat, for example. All users are assigned to the global org-wide default policy by default. So additional custom policies can be created and assigned to individual users, but any user can only be assigned to one messaging policy at a time. And messaging policies are basically managed from the Microsoft Teams Admin Center and through the Skype for Business PowerShell CMD-lets. So let's take a short look on the messaging policy settings itself. So messaging policies obviously can be used to activate or deactivate messaging features and to configure or enforce messaging settings. That includes the chat and conversations. For example, the setting owners can delete sent messages. Obviously it's the same part that you can delete the messages sent by other users. Users can delete the sent messages, their own sent messages. The users can edit sent message, so users can edit their own sent message, and we have the read receipts. So basically this is user controlled. That lets the user configure whether to receive read receipts or not, or it's on for everyone, that enforces read receipts for all affected users without the option to turn them off, or off for everyone, and that deactivates the read receipts for all affected users without the option to activate. If we come to chat, that controls basically whether the user can use chat in Teams or not. Short side note, it does not affect the ability to participate in conversation in specific. The use GIFs in conversation really controls whether you can use Giphy animated GIF files in the chat conversations. Then we have the Giphy content rating. We have two options here, better say three. No restriction, that's the first one, means that all the content obviously is permitted without any restriction. And then we have the both moderate and strict. Moderate in this case means that it allows inserting images with up to a moderate content rating for adult content, and the strict is just allows only Giphy images without any rating for adult content. On the other hand, we have the use memes in conversations, the chat conversations, we have the stickers, and we have to allow URL previews. It allows it or not in basic. On the other hand, we have to allow users to translate messages, which controls whether users can have chat messages translated automatically into their configured language. We have the allow immerse reader for viewing messages, and we have the user can send notifications. With this specific sending notifications part, we have a priority for notifications, notify users every 2 minutes for a period of 20 minutes or until the messages are picked up and read by the recipient itself. For the voice message creation, we have 3 settings. The allowed in chats and channels, which permits users to leave voice messages in both chats and channels. The second option is allowed in chats only. That allows users to leave voice messages in chats but not in channels in specific. And disabled obviously restricts the users from creating voice messages in chats or channels. On mobile devices, the display favorite channels above recent chats really controls exactly this mobile behavior. The last point is allow a user to remove users from a group chat. So that's, I think, clear about that. You can create a new messaging policy obviously in the Teams Admin Center under the messaging policies, and later on you assign it to the specific users itself. To manage messaging policies, you need a few PowerShell CMDlets if you want to do it over that. You can get, for example, the global one with get-cs Teams messaging policy global. That's one point what we can use. We can also use new, set and grant and the remove option of the CS Teams messaging policy CMDlet itself. Guest access allows teams in your organization to collaborate with people outside your organization by granting them access to existing teams and channels on one or more of your tenants. Anyone with a business or consumer email account, such as Outlook, Gmail or others, can participate as a guest in Teams with full access to team chats, meetings and files and other things inside of your Teams. Guest access is an org-wide setting in Teams and it's turned off by default. The guest access is also a subject of the Azure Active Directory and the Office 365. So you have different options, but we have discussed it already in session 2, how you can configure it specifically the guest access in this moment. Just a short reminder about the security features, the information barrier policies that apply also to guest users in Teams too. So if a guest user needs to be discoverable in your organization's global address list, you can also use that when you enable it on the Microsoft Groups itself. So once a guest user is discoverable, you can define also information barrier policies. So this gives you a lot of capabilities also for security features and to allow you to restrict the access to specific communications as well for the guest accounts. As we can see in the following figure, we have many systems in the game where we can configure the guest access itself. First of all, the Azure Active Directory, where guest access in Microsoft Teams relies specifically on this Azure AD business-to-business platform, and the authorization level controls specifically the level of the guest experience at the directory tenant and on the application level. In Teams, we can control the guest experience for Microsoft Teams only, and in Microsoft 365 specifically for that and for Microsoft Teams, obviously. SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business controls the guest experience in SharePoint Online, OneDrive Business, Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams. So these different authorization levels provide you with the flexibility in really how you set up guest access for your organization. For example, if you don't allow guest users in your Microsoft Teams but want to allow it overall into your organization, you can just turn off the guest access in Microsoft Teams. Another example would be you enable guest access at the Azure AD, Teams and Groups levels, and you disable in addition the guest users on selected teams that match one or more criteria, such as the data classification equals to confidential, for example. SharePoint and OneDrive for Business have their own guest access settings that do not rely on Microsoft 365 Groups itself. So if we see that, we see at first the Azure Active Directory. Is it allowed, yes or no? And if no, obviously the invitation is not allowed. So otherwise it goes to the next step, to Microsoft Teams, which relies on Azure Active Directory, the Office 365 Groups and external settings, and if it disabled, obviously the guest addition is denied. If yes, the guest authentication works, and if no, the deny comes back. So you have the SPA allow external sharing topic, which affects to files, notes, wiki. We have the Office 365 Groups owners that allowed to add guests, which affects the team owners that can really add a guest, and the can user access apps, tabs and bots, which obviously affects the same topics here. As you can see, the team owner in Microsoft Teams can add and manage guests in their teams via the web, mobile, desktop client. So anyone with a business or consumer email account, as I already mentioned, can participate as a guest. People outside your organization, such as partners or consultants, can be added as guests, and people from within your organization, they can join as a regular team member. The following functionality, I really need to capture that, is not available for guest users. OneDrive for Business standalone SKU, the people search outside of Teams, the calendar, scheduled meetings or meeting details, the PSTN calling, the organizational chart, the create or revise a team, and as I remember correctly, browse for a team and uploads files to person-to-person chat. You can configure the functionality of a guest user to limit their permissions inside the teams they are added or disable guests altogether. So how to do this, we will go through in the demonstration I already have presented in the section 2. While using Teams, text and icons give all team members a clear indication of guest participation in a team. A guest username includes also the label guest, and the channel includes an icon to indicate that there are guests on the team. But we need to also discuss the external access VS versus the guest access. So the guest access gives access permissions to an individual. The external access gives access permission to an entire domain. And the guest access utilizes your existing licenses when using certain features. So Teams doesn't restrict the number of guests you can add. However, the total number of guests that can be added to your tenant is based on what your Azure AD licensing allows, usually 5 guests per licensed users. Just go through the Azure AD B2B collaboration licensing to gather more information about exactly this topic. The external access specifically allows you to communicate with users from other domains that are already using Teams, and therefore they need to provide their own licenses inside of Teams. Another important point which we need to discuss here is the guest access user experience from the invitation side. So first of all, we need to check the settings on Azure Active Directory that members can invite, and this allows to guest exist on the tenant. Members, for example, cannot invite new guests to a tenant. That's also a capability if you disable the guest access on your Azure AD tenant. On the other hand, what we need to do, if it's allowed, we check the external tenant and group settings on Office 365 groups. So you can add users or not. On the other hand, we have the guest invite process. There we need to have a closer look on it. I think it's pretty clear. You get an invitation if you add a guest users from another Office 365 tenant, and the user itself authenticates against his tenant and will be able to access with this authentication mechanism that's getting access. We get the access for the user for the resource we give him access in the source tenant. If we use a Outlook.com or any Gmail or anything like that, we need to have specifically a Live ID account that is directly federated with the Azure Active Directory. And for example, if we want to use Gmail, we need to establish a federation with the Gmail, with Google. That's a quite easy process. You just need to have a free account of Google, and then you can build up a specific application and federate your Azure Active Directory with that. So you can directly use Gmail accounts, for example, to access your Teams resources over this guest process. On the other hand, we have, if you have only a mailbox, for example, you're also allowed to access Teams. So maybe you have a specific mailbox provider, not Office 365, any other hoster, and you send to this account an invitation. He will receive the normal invitation, and the process works like this. If you enable that, he gets an OTP token sent to the email address. So he needs to have access to this specific mailbox to receive the OTP token, and then he is allowed to authenticate against Azure Active Directory and can access the Teams resources as a common other user. That's a great way that you can work with from this perspective. Because Azure AD enables you to collaborate internally with your organization and with users from external organizations such as partners, it's really essential that your organization regularly review all user access to ensure that only the right people have access to the cloud sources. This can be accomplished through an Azure AD feature titled Access Reviews, which enables you as an organization to efficiently manage group memberships, access to enterprise applications, and role assignments. I have already shown that as well in the section 2. If you attended that, it may be a short reminder of that. So users' access can be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure the only right people have continued access. And not often permissions provide users with unintended access to cloud resources. What you can do with the access reviews specifically, you have too many users in privileged roles, for example, and it's always a good idea to check how many users have administrative access, how many of them are global admin, and if they're an invited guest or partner, they have not been removed after being assigned to an administrative task. Then, when automation is infeasible, for example, you can create rules and reviews for dynamic memberships on security groups or Microsoft 365 groups. This ensures basically that those users who still need access continue to have access.
When a group is used for a new purpose is also another point you can gather there. If you have a group that is going to be synced to Azure AD, or if you plan to enable an application for everyone in a specific group, it would be useful to ask the group owner to review the group membership prior to the group being used in a different risk content, for example. On the other hand, we have the business critical data access that's important for us. This is for certain resources. It might be required to ask people outside of IT to really regularly sign out and give a justification on why they need access for auditing purposes, for example. The other option is to maintain a policies exception list. In an ideal world, obviously all users would follow the access policies to secure access to your organization resources. But however, sometimes there are business cases that require to make you the exceptions. Also, the next one is the asking for group owners to confirm that they still need the guest access in their groups. The employee access might be automated with some on-premises identity and access management tool, but not the invited guests. So if a group gives guest access to business sensitive content, then it's the group owner's responsibility to confirm that the guests still have a legitimate business need for access, for example. And another tip, have reviews recurring periodically. So you can set up this in access reviews that set the frequency like weekly, monthly, quarterly or annually, and the new reviewers will be notified at the start of each review. So reviewers can approve or deny access with a friendly interface and with the help of smart recommendations. Using the Azure AD access reviews requires an Azure AD Premium P2 license. That's a little bit the point to go forward. So after discussing the guest access and the access reviews, we come to the features of Teams and the Outlook integration. The integration between Outlook and Teams makes it very easy to collaborate, and no matter where the conversation is taking place. Here in this slide we see the share to Outlook option, where users can share chats or channel conversations to Outlook without leaving Teams by selecting on the share to Outlook in the more options icon in a conversation. But you have also the capability to share to Teams. So users can move an email conversation from Outlook, including attachments, into a Teams chat or channel conversation by selecting on the share to Teams in Outlook option. The third option is actionable missed activity mails. So the user can set notification for missed activity emails to stay on top of missed conversations in Teams. The missed activity emails show the latest replies from the conversation and allow users to respond directly from within Outlook itself. Exactly in this slide we see the actionable activity emails, as I mentioned before. You can also set the organization config with the set-organization config CMDLet together with the SMTP actionable message enabled parameter to turn off actionable emails. By default, the SMTP actionable messages enabled parameter is set to true. Setting this parameter to false turns off all actionable email messages across Office 365. So for Teams users, this means that the reply option to respond directly in Outlook isn't available and missed activity emails. Instead, the missed activity emails include a reply in Teams option for users to reply in Teams itself. After talking a lot about the guest user access and also the preview of the external user access, we now go to have a real focus on the external access functionality itself. So it's not the guest invite what we are talking about. We are talking how I can communicate with an external partner, what things are allowed, and all the functionality that is available exactly for external users in that case. With Microsoft Teams, the external access, Teams users from other domains can participate in your chats and calls. So you can also allow other external users who are still using Sky for Business Online or Sky for Business server. You basically use the external access when you have following considerations, like you have users in a different domain and your business. For example, you have rob at contoso.com and ann at northwindtraders.com. Or you want to have people in your organization to use Teams to contact people in specific business outside of your organization, or you want anyone else in the world who uses Teams to be able to find and contact you using your email address. Basically, external access allows external users to find, call and send instant messages, as well as set up meetings with you. So, however, if you want to use external users to have access to Teams and channels, guest access is the only mechanism. By side, you will be able to set up meetings with external users without enabling external access, but in that case they will join the meeting as an unauthenticated user instead of joining with their federated and authenticated user accounts. And maybe that's a little bit conflicting with your logging, security policies, compliance topics or whatever. So that's the basic stuff what we can see about exactly that. So after talking about the general facts about this, we need to see what we can do exactly in the Teams Admin Center. We have 3 scenarios in basic, which I have the open federation. This is basically the default setting. So and it lets people in your organization find calls and IM messages and also the external ones. That's the open federation scenario, what we can see in the admin center. The second one is that we want to add a domain or domains to an allow list. So it's really important to know that if you do this, it will block all other domains. So really think about that. Do you want to put an allow, or better say a block list, which is scenario 3. So maybe you say contoso.com, northwindtraders, or whatever, which one will be allowed, then all the other domains will be blocked. And in the other side, in scenario 3, you just really block the domains you don't want to allow the contact to them, and all other domains are allowed during the process to work with you. That's basically the topic what you can do inside of the external access topic, and can work with that. You can do that in the Teams Admin Center under org-wide settings, under external access, and there you have the specific buttons for the external access itself. And on the other hand, we have one note on this. If you allow federation, your users will only be able to use one-on-one chat, voice video calls, and set up meetings with external users. So this is another important topic. You should really know about this. In the following figure you will see exactly this allow or block domains scenario, which I already explained from the theory. Here we see exactly the screenshot about it. So users can communicate with other Sky for Business and Teams users, or users can communicate with Sky for Business users. These are the settings, and then you can start filling up the allowed block lists and the denied block list, for example. And very important topic is to test really your setup. Obviously you need a Teams user who is not behind your firewall, and after you and the admin from the organization have changed the external access settings, you should really be good to go. In the Teams app you can search for this person by an email address and send a request to a chat. That's a good test for me, and ask your Teams contact to send you a request to chat. If you don't receive the request, the problem is your firewall setting, assuming they have already confirmed that the firewall settings are correct. And another way to test whether the problem is your firewall, to go a Wi-Fi location not behind your firewall, such as a coffee shop, and use Teams and send a request your contact to chat. And if the message goes through at the Wi-Fi location but does not work when you are in your own network, maybe it's a known problem in your firewall itself. So really test exactly this functionality. That's a high important topic.
As we already know, one of the core features of Microsoft Teams is the collaboration service, and it provides through SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. So when a new team is created, a new SharePoint site is provisioned, including sub-sites for any public channels created in the team. If a team is added to an already existing Microsoft 365 group, the public channels are added in the existing SharePoint site. Files that are shared in a public channel are automatically added to the document library, and permissions and file security options set in SharePoint Online are also automatically reflected within Teams. Creating private channels differs from creating public channels because private channels are not stored in a document library within the same site. Every private channel has its own site collection that's separated from the parent team site. This ensures access to private channel files is restricted to only the members of the private channel. From the site infrastructure, as we see here in the slide, so any tenant has two unique namespaces below, like SharePoint Online, better say SharePoint.com, where all SharePoint Online sites and OneDrive for Business storages are located. For example, if you are under Contoso Corporation, we have on SharePoint https contoso.sharepoint.com/sites, and on OneDrive for Business we have http contoso-my.sharepoint.com/personal. When a new Microsoft 365 group or team is created, a new SharePoint site is provisioned below the tenant's unique namespace. So for example, if you use Finance Team in the Contoso tenant, that it contains the default general channel, and it would appear like finance is https contoso.sharepoint.com/sites finance, and the general channel with sharepoint.com/sites finance shared documents general. When a new channel is generated, a folder in shared documents is automatically provisioned. So for example, if additional channels like titled internal or budget or whatever, I make just an example for that, the shared documents internal and SharePoint shared documents budget will exist on this site. The diagram shows exactly how it works with the specific document libraries and the relationship between that. All SharePoint Online sites of Teams can be accessed through the Teams client, obviously, or directly through the browser to upload, download, or change the storage files. So it's also possible for members and owners to synchronize a client to document libraries with your OneDrive for Business client. But as soon as the B2B sync feature is available, guests can also synchronize the document libraries of Teams in which they have been added as a guest, for example. The SharePoint site permissions is also a specific topic. Like regular SharePoint sites, Teams SharePoint resources contain the three default permission groups: members, owners, and visitors. In contrast to a pure SharePoint site collection, these permission groups on a team site cannot be edited or changed in that case. So when assigning a team owner or members through one of the clients or through the Teams admin center, the users are also added into the respective permission group. Specifically, what we need to see as well is about the Teams utilization of SharePoint. So Teams not only supports the manual upload of files to its document libraries, it also supports storing the resources in SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business, like files shared in a private chat, stored in the Sanders OneDrive for Business Microsoft Teams chat file folder, files or pictures sent as conversations, the channels document library is the store, and mails sent to a channel, the channels document library into a subfolder email message is the specific part on it. Another important part is the SharePoint site permissions in private channels. Because private channels are not stored within the site collection of the team, but settings of a team, such as members and classification, also affect the private channels, a sync process between the team site collection and the independent site collections is in place. So if a member leaves or is removed from a team, that users will also be removed from private channels in the team. Changes to a team like this that also affect the private channels are synchronized within 4 hours automatically. That's a number you should really remember on. Note, all the private channels need an owner, so a private channel owner can't be removed through the Teams client if they are the last owner of one or more private channels. So if a private channel owner leaves your organization, or if they are removed from the Microsoft 365 associated group with the team, a member of the private channel is automatically promoted to the private channel owner. The following figure you see exactly how OneDrive for Business interacts with Microsoft Teams. So you see the Microsoft Teams structure, user 1, user 2, user 2 and 3. So we will have a OneDrive representation in OneDrive for Business like personal/user1, documents, Microsoft Teams chat files. Because I already mentioned that, the OneDrive folder for Microsoft Teams chat files is used to store all the files that are shared within the private chats with other users, like one-to-ones or one-to-many. So the permissions are configured automatically in the background for you specifically on that. Note that for specific public teams, the SharePoint team site is provisioned with everyone except external users access. So the public team isn't displayed in Teams for people who aren't members of that team. However, they can access content on the SharePoint team site using the URL of the SharePoint team site itself. In the next demonstration, I will show you how you can configure external access for SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. So now we configure the external access for SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. The first setting we always need to mention, or we need to take care about, is the external collaboration settings in Azure Active Directory, because this setting overrides all the Microsoft 365 services, and that is why it's very important that the guest invitation is allowed, and specifically for the admins and users in the guest invite role that can invite, or the members can invite. Here we find the specific section for the one-time passcode. This is used for guests. They are only hosted by a mailbox provider. So you need to really care about that. In my case, I allow all invitations for right now. Obviously, I can also fill up the deny and allow invitations list on this specific feature. If we have prepared this stuff here, we can jump over to the SharePoint admin center, which we find under policies sharing, the specific SharePoint and OneDrive settings. So we see here that we have a least permissive, most permissive one, and we see how we handle anyone, new and existing guests, and only people in your organization. We have also more topics with limitations about external sharing by domain, allow only users in specific security groups to share externally, and another feature that guests really must sign into using the same account to which the sharing invitations are sent. So also about the file handling and different other topics here. What we need to keep care about it is the following, that we really need to think about the specific section here about anyone with the link, for example. We choose this option if you expect to do a lot of unauthenticated file and folder sharing. Then that's a great way to go forward. But in case of security, obviously you need to disable this feature set, because what the security guys want is that you need to authenticate, the first thing, specific for sensitive contents, and that they have a logging and that they control the mechanisms inside of your organization. Also what we have is that we see here down where we can do the file and folder links working. So also that's the same part, so only people in your organization, for example I choose this option if I expect most file and folder sharing to be with people inside my org, or a specific people when I consider this option to expect to do a lot of file and sharings with guests, for example. So that's a few stuff here what we can control over the external sharing settings in specific. So we can also do the following, that we say, for example, okay, we want just to have new and existing guests. So guests really must sign in to or provide a verification code in this scenario. So how we can work with that, and specifically if we share a document, for example, or anything outside of our organization. How we can do that? Basically, if I jump here on the client and see here my, for example, synchronized project, and if I click here inside of this topic and I want to share it, obviously this is a corporate resource that is managed under the Teams aspect. So I'm not allowed to really share it over this way directly outside of this specific context on my client. If I want to share, for example, this with an external person, I need to use my personal OneDrive. So that I go, for example, to my PC and search my personal OneDrive I commonly use for that specific scenario. Like that, to say, okay, this is my OneDrive, what I have, or my sync, what I have used for this project from Teams. And on the other hand, I have here my OneDrive for my personal topics. And obviously I can go through my personal topic here to say, okay, I want to sign in. I need to provide my password. I'm here on a computer that is not joined to the domain. So now I can really directly jump in. I already prepared it before. And from this perspective, I can go to share obviously this information. I can do this directly as well here in the document itself. To say, for example, I want to share the document. So then I can choose what I want to use, for example, specific people outside my organization. I say, okay, I allow this editing, but now you need to keep care, because if I call here, for example, Jeff Barnes at web.ch, that's an external account I already added as a guest, and I send it over to that specific user. But what you see in the background is that my document here is protected by rights management. Why? Because I have here the confidential label, and all employees are only allowed to access specifically this information. So let's try to see what's happening here. For example, is another security mechanism. I go to this account, just authenticate about that. This is the scenario where I host on a mailbox provider, and I just received this specific document here. So, and I can now click to open specifically that topic. What's happening is that I need to go to the secure link. I need to authenticate as Jeff Barnes. This is the send code scenario I showed you in the presentation. So I just need to wait a few seconds. I get the account verification code. I can enter this and sign in. So I approved a policy that guest users need to verify by specifically the multi-factor authentication. It's a protection mechanism I use here. And the user needs to accept the terms of use. I have just published an example terms of use here in my demo environment that you can see exactly this topic. On the other hand, I have to accept it, because if I don't accept it, I cannot go forward. So this is the first mechanisms I use. So the next thing is, I can't open it over the web interface because it's not allowed to, or the functionality is not there in the specific part. To edit is in the web part itself. So I need to edit it in the desktop app. If I am on the other side now, I'm not signed in with my Word document and I don't have any credential on it. So if I just open it, and I'm not signed in as a user in my organization, I would get an access denied message exactly for that topic, because I'm not allowed to access the document. So we have several mechanisms with the links, what we can do on the side of the SharePoint configuration, what I have shown here. Then we can approve the guest settings. I have done this here basically on the Azure Active Directory level. Additionally, what I have done to bring all the stuff in the game is I provided specifically conditional access policies for guests. We have done this in section 2. I just give an overview where I say Teams guest access must be authenticated by multi-factor authentication, and the guest user needs to accept the user terms of use. So you can really apply this here to secure environments to provide an external access to all your external persons and guests of your organization. Teams apps are a way to aggregate one or more capabilities into an app package that can be installed, upgraded and installed. So Teams provide a default set of apps published by Microsoft and by third parties that are designed to engage users, support productivity, and integrate commonly used business services into Teams. For example, users can use the Planner app to build and manage team tasks in Teams, and these apps are available through the organization through the Teams App Store. By default, all apps, including custom apps that you have submitted through the Teams App Store approval process, are turned on for all users. While all Microsoft apps and all custom apps are available by default, Teams admin can turn the availability of individual apps on or off. So for an efficient purpose, and an organization-wide setting is available that lets Teams turn all custom apps on or off for the entire organization. In the Teams app section of the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, you can set specifically the policies to manage apps for your organization. For example, you can allow or block apps at the org level and set policies to control what apps are available to Teams users and customize Teams by pinning the apps that are most important for your users. So we have really a great capability, and because of this we need obviously discuss the implementation of policies for Microsoft Teams apps. To give you a short overview, we can see the following: the ways that you can interact with apps and services in Teams, like a chat with a bot which provides answers, updates, assistance in a channel, or you can chat with them one-on-one or in a channel, for example. The second thing is you can share content on a tab, so like an Excel file or anything like that. So tabs help you to share content and functionality from your favorite services in a channel, basically. Then we have the updating mechanisms from a connector, that a connector sends, for example, updates and information directly to a channel. It's a typical scenario like from services from Trello, Jira, Twitter, RSS feeds, GitHub and many more things, that you get informed about the stuff inside of your Teams channel, for example. On the other hand, we have rich content to your messages. So the apps find content from different services and send it straight to a message. That's a great way to collect different information together and put it inside of the Microsoft Teams application as well. Okay, let's go through the management of app permission policies in Microsoft Teams. So when you block an app, for example, users who have the policy are unable to install it from the Teams App Store. Basically, you need to be a global administrator or Teams service admin to manage exactly these policies. You manage app permission policies in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, and you can use the global org-wide default policy or create your custom policies that need to affect or be able to provide you the solving process for your requirements. So users in your organization will automatically get the global policy unless you really create and assign a custom policy. After you edit or assign a policy, it can take a few hours for changes to take the effect. So if your organization is already on Teams, the app settings you configured in the tenant-wide settings in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center are reflected in the org-wide app settings on the Manage Apps page, for example. If you're new to Teams and just getting started, by default all apps are allowed in the global policy. So this includes apps published by Microsoft third parties and your specific organization. So let's say, for example, you want to block all third-party apps and allow specific apps from Microsoft for the HR team in your organization. First you would go to the Manage Apps page and make sure that the apps you want to allow to the HR team are allowed at the org level. Then you go over and start to create a custom policy named, for example, HR App Permission Policy, and set it to block and allow the apps that you want, and you assign that to the HR users itself. So we see now the creation of a custom app permission policy with the Microsoft apps, third-party apps, and the custom apps. So if you want to control the apps that are available for different groups of users in your organization, create and assign just a custom app permission policy. You can create that separate custom policy based on whether apps are published by Microsoft third parties or your organization, as you can see here with the switches we have. Just to have an additional information on custom app policies and settings, because Microsoft Teams enables developers in your organization to build, for example, test and deploy custom apps to other users. So custom apps can be added to Teams by uploading an app package in a zip file directly to team or in the personal context. So you can set up policies to control who in your organization can upload custom apps, and you can also set on the organizational wide settings to control whether user can really interact with these specific custom apps in that case. Okay, let's look on a specific point for Microsoft 365 Government. You can use the org-wide app settings obviously to control whether you install third-party apps or not. So org-wide app settings govern the behavior for all users and override any other app permission policy you assigned to users. So you can use them to control malicious or problematic apps. For example, they allow third-party apps. This control whether users can use third-party apps or not. So if you turn this off, this setting, your users won't be able to install or use any third-party apps. In a Microsoft 365 Government GCC deployment of Teams, this setting is off by default. Allow any new third-party apps published to the store by default. This controls whether new third-party apps that are published to the Teams App Store become automatically available in Teams. You can also set this option if you allow third parties. Under the blocked apps option, the apps you want to block across your organization in a Microsoft 365 Government GCC deployment, all third-party apps are added to this list by default. So for any third-party app you want to allow in your organization, remove the app from the blocked app list. When you block an org-wide app, the app is automatically blocked for all users, regardless of whether it's allowed in any app permission policies. To manage the app setup policies, that's a great tool because it allows you to customize Teams to highlight the apps that are most important for users. So you can choose the apps to pin and set the order that they appear. Pinning apps lets you showcase apps that users in your organization need, for example, including those built by third parties or by developers in your organization. It controls whether a user can pin apps to teams. Install apps on behalf of users is a preview, and you can choose which apps are installed by default for users when they start teams. Keep in mind that users can still install apps themselves if the app permission policy that's assigned to them allows the specific feature. App setup policies let you really customize the experience, as we already discussed. And you can do the following examples, like drive the awareness and adoption for core apps, or you can selectively pin core Teams features such as chat, Teams and calling. That's a great opportunity to do. You can do it in the Teams admin center, and you can work exactly on these topics to bring really the bar and pinning and all the information in a good scenario that the user experience is in a great way. And that's really important. This is why we discussed this as well in this module. Let's say Teams provides a great out-of-the-box collaboration experience for your organization. And most organizations find that default settings for apps work for them very good in this manner. But still you may want to change some of the default settings to accommodate your organization business requirements. So we have 3 settings for that: the app's availability, the app's permissions, and the app templates. The app's availability, which Teams provides apps published by Microsoft and third parties. These apps engage user support, productivity, and all of that stuff what we already have discussed. The app's permissions are consented to by the user and managed by the admin or the IT professionals through policies, as we already heard about. So however, for the most part, an app's permissions and risk profiles are defined at its app itself. The app templates, this is a production-ready app for Microsoft Teams, are community-driven, open source, or available on GitHub, so you can really have detailed instructions before deploying and installing exactly this set of features. In the following example that you see on the slide, you can exactly see what you can do with the app policy, so that they are pinned at the app bar, and this is the bar on the side of Teams, just to know about this. And on the desktop client at the bottom of the Teams mobile client, for example, on iOS and Android. Here you can see really how you can affect usability for the application itself. Further, we can see here how we can set up this policy. So we can define a name for our specific setup policy, and we see the installed apps that we choose on that. So we can also say, okay, how to allow upload of custom apps and all the different features that we really use here, like allow user pinning, the installed apps, and the pinned apps in this case. So this is really a great opportunity, and it's an easy to do task for an administrator as you to provide exactly that topic. In the next demonstration, I will show you that in real time. So to create a custom app setup policy, how you can do that specifically in your environment. So let's see how we can prepare a custom app setup policy in that case. You see here I have a test one, a first line worker, and the global org-wide default one. So I just click on the add part. Let's say, for example, that's the HR app setup policy. And here, for example, I can say I am allowed to upload custom apps, allowed the user pinnings. And then I can say, okay, I say here, okay, search based on this. I want to search it specifically on the global one. And I see, okay, my specific information workers or HRs works with Salesforce or with Success. This is not available actually, this application, but let's say, okay, we need some specific applications that we want to go through. Let's say we have this sales team application where the HR team also needs to do something inside. Also, obviously, we can add the Microsoft apps, like we have the planner. We say add, we say, for example, we want to have the Power BI add-in. So, and these are the applications we want to have in our setup policy. We also can say here, obviously, that we have the pinned apps. We can also add specific here in the global then to pin the Power BI. It's not working in that case. Let's see the planner. Yeah. And we can add this to bring this up to pin exactly this feature on the left pane in our Microsoft Teams environment. So let's just click add on this specific part. So obviously I can do now the assignment. I just show here if I want to have it for a specific user set. Let's say, okay, we have here this user. We see the policies that already applied for that. And now we can change specifically the app setup policy to our HR app setup policy in that case. And then it's get affecting for our users in that case. Obviously you can do all the stuff over PowerShell and other mechanisms to automate exactly that stuff in the back end. You can make bulk operations and so on to really put that in the game. You can, for example, you say, okay, these are the users, and I just make edit settings. Just wait a second here, and then I can define the specific policy I have created and assign it in a bulk operation. That's also another perspective you can work with. Obviously you can also use the Microsoft Teams Admin Center to edit a policy, including the global org-wide default policy and custom policies, obviously, that you create, what you have seen before. So in the left navigation of the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, you just need to go to Teams Apps, set up the policies where we were before in the demonstration, and you will see all the typical things to do then. You can also assign the policy directly to users, either to individually or to a scale through a batch assignment, if this specifically is supported by the policy type you use, or to a group that the users are members of, and if this also supported is by the policy type what you're gonna use. So let's do a short summary on this specific topic. We have the user custom app policy, we have the team custom app settings, and we have the org-wide custom app settings. The user custom app policy, which is a part of an app setup policy, you as an admin, you can use this policy setting obviously to control how you can upload custom apps and how they're gonna be used in your environment. The team custom app settings allows you as an admin or a team owner to control how a team is allowed to use custom apps and to be added, that they're gonna be added for. So these settings specifically allow members also to upload custom apps. That's also a great capability to really improve the business and bring their needs in the game. The org-wide custom app settings is just really that you allow the interaction in general for custom applications. So that's a good way really with this combined functionality to provide a great workplace for our users. To store documents in Microsoft 365, we have both the OneDrive and the team sites provided inside of your organization. First of all, obviously we have the OneDrive for Business option. for the business documents, for my documents, and we can edit all the documents inside that. We can work with them. We can share specifically them with specific people outside our organization. Then on the other hand, we have the business documents for a team, for example in a team site, to store team plans that everyone updates or publishes meeting agendas. All the members of the team can find and edit the documents, and team members can work on them from their own. So basically OneDrive is designed for individual use with also sharing of files, and the team side is designed for sharing and collaborating on files regularly. So a team site is the ideal for storing files that have shared ownership, where several people own the files and might collaborate on them. So in this case really it's the best way to really create a team on the team side that is behind of that. In the next demonstration I will show you an example on set up OneDrive and share your files and the differences between the two stores, so that you really get a good idea which tool you work on your organization and for which behavior. So let's go a step to move forward also additionally to the OneDrive topic, what I also shown in another demo in this time. So what I want to show is how you can really set up it, how you can work with the specific topics, and how you can sync several files for your own needs, for example. For this I already connected to the Microsoft Teams environment and just make a get team to see all the teams that are available here. What I do for right now is I put in here a new team in that game. So I just call it CX team. That's the one I have already here. This is the mail nickname. I just need to provide my example name here. That's from the further topic here. I just call it HR team. Create this one, and directly I will see that afterwards here as well in my client, that we have all the steps together. Here the HR team appears in my section. I just put, for example, a team user for it. So this is another user from this department. I add this as a member. That's a great way to go here if you want to manage it. I see directly that this user is there, and I make some additional channels available that we have a few things that we can configure on it. So, and now we see all the parts here, what we have in this specific topic. So then let's do the following. I just bring a demo Word file in it. So let's say okay equals random. Well, let's produce a little bit of text. So that the sensitivity is general, that's perfect, is the automatic part, and we can also call it here to say okay, I just store it here in, and let's say I browse for it, put it in the meanwhile here on that, and say general information. So now we have this file available, and I put this, for example, in my file structure in the general tab, and now I move it here in this specific part. So if we see that here it's quite easy and moving forward process, I just need to click here sync, and now I'm syncing the HR team in general. So that's the basic stuff what I have here to work with. So it's online available, and as we already know, I cannot share it directly here from this perspective. Another way to go exactly on this topic is to go to SharePoint And to say okay, I do the same, I click here on sync. That provides the same procedure as we have seen before. So it's trying to use the OneDrive topic, and I'm here to put it in a new OneDrive. That's another assistant. You just need to provide your access information and you will get the same result like we have here. We have now the HR team and the project X that is synchronized with my OneDrive. But it's not my personal OneDrive, because this we already have seen in the previous topic. That's the one I use specifically for my corporate documents. So if I want to go to my personal, obviously, is also available here, that I see here, and that's my personal OneDrive. With this I'm allowed really to share and do the stuff what I want. I also can go through the following process that I show, for example, the file directly also in SharePoint. That's also possible on my OneDrive itself. So I'm totally free how to work with that, and from this perspective I'm also allowed to send all my topics and share it with other persons. That's a great opportunity to go for. Let's see the project set, for example. This is another test file I already prepared, and then I can go directly save this one because my autosave is already in place, and I'm able to share exactly this document directly. So I can use, for example, the anyone with the link to edit, and I say okay, I want to have this, for example, for Jeff Barnes at Wayweb, which I used in the previous one. Say okay, I want to send this, and then on the other hand I'm able to go through this exactly and to see my post, my mailbox here. I see the project set is now also shared, and this link will work for anyone. So now let's see how it's working for me, and it's directly opening, and it's all around the stuff, because I just need to open it. It's an unauthenticated way to go forward. So I have shown you the setup of OneDrive and share files. That's a great way really to go forward with sharing information. The recommended certification obviously for all these modules, as I mentioned during this whole virtual training series, is the exam MS700. And really I recommend always to go to the skills that is measured if you plan to go for this certification, because it's sometimes very tricky with the Microsoft Teams, because we have a broad range of services behind of Microsoft Teams, like SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, Jammer, and all the different things that goes around of that, like Azure Active Directory, conditional access, access reviews, and the whole Microsoft 365 security and compliance feature set. So go through these skills that is measured, prepare all the stuff what you do, and also for that you can use the learning resources on Microsoft Learn. That gives you a great capability to go through all the material. Obviously you can also attend additional trainings or do it on your own hands. That's the best way really to gather all the information that is based on the skills that is measured in this exam. We have basically 3 topics on that. Plan and configure Microsoft Teams environment is a big one with soon 50%. The management of chat, calling and meetings around 30 to 35%. And the managing Teams and app policies with 20 to 25%. So what we work tomorrow on the last day of this virtual training series, we will focus on the management of communication in Microsoft Teams. So we will go through the management of live event and meetings experiences, the management of phone numbers, the management of phone systems for Microsoft Teams, and to troubleshoot audio, video and client issues. And A small part of it is also the monitoring and analyzing for the service usage. So it's also a very important topic because this is really what you go in the communication part, aside of this collaboration part what we had today. So really recommend you to attend this session. It will be a good idea to really that you are working on the telephone and the phone topics. This will be covered tomorrow in this session. So hope to see you again tomorrow. Dig in deep with the material I provided you, research and do your hands-on, and really go ahead working on Teams. As usually, after working through the different aspects of Microsoft Teams during the session about collaboration and all that stuff, I really highly recommend that you go through the management of team collaboration part on Microsoft Learn. That gives you also a great capability to really dig deeper into the different topics and gives you additional information and maybe ideas which articles you can work further and to gather more and more information about Microsoft Teams. Let me give you a big thank you that you attend this 2-hour session and maybe the complete virtual training series. Hopefully I gave you a few of information and that you can go ahead with your experience on Microsoft Teams, and really I love really to bring you that, and thank you very much really to attend these specific sessions.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. I hope our participants will really benefit from it. Also, as an additional resource, let me remind you that this series on managing Microsoft Teams MS700 will also be available for you to watch on demand at aka.ms/enablevts and aka.ms/training center. You can also download the list of upcoming VTSs and register for those in advance. So thank you all for being here with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye.